Plugin of the week is the SoundToys Effect Rack. This is a release as part of the SoundToys 5. A couple things you need to know about SoundToys 5. One is that now, if you hate a iLock, then you can now authorize on your computers without an iLock. There are some enhancements made to some of the tweak menus. So when you get into some of the parameters here, like with Filter Freak, you can open up and you can get into some extended parameters that are available in the mix rack. So it's taking a little second there for it to pop up. And then there's no RTAS or TDM plugins. So if you're working with a Pro Tools 10 or prior application, they're letting that 32-bit architecture go, but you can also run VST and audio units, so that stays the same, no problems on that end. But they're moving forward into the AAX platform, and I think you're going to see this more and more from manufacturers. So that's a consideration also if that's a situation on that end. Otherwise, the 18 plugins, so now as part of the collection, they've added in a couple of others, including the Primal Tap and the Little Altar Boy. Some of those, like the Little Altar Boy, I believe was part of a deal where you could get it for free. So that's kind of now included in this whole thing. And what this does is it adds a whole bunch of extra features into it. What's really cool about opening up the effect rack, and it opens up just like any of the other plugins, is that now you have your effects all laid out here on the side, and you could sort of add or remove them as you kind of please. So there are some new features that you have in here. Now what you have is you have the ability to store and load in presets that are full rack presets. So if you kind of find that you have like a particular vocal sound or a vocal setup or anything along those lines, you can kind of load that whole chain in, store that chain, and then rather than calling up all of the individual plugins and dialing in the individual presets, you can bypass all of that stuff. You save your presets by hitting the little funky disk icon right here, going to the old floppy 1.44 megabyte, one of my favorites. You got the, this is the basically a way of doing a comparison between what you had and what the preset is. So that's just an undo sort of redo thing on a singular level. Also, what you get here is an entire top section that's added in, and it gives you a couple things. One, you can globally set up the whole thing to run in MIDI. So when you run in MIDI mode, it's going to look for the tempo of your host and use that as the clock source. And so your tempo, so even if you tried to adjust it, it's going to go right back into 20. If you wanted to do this, you could tap it out, do whatever way that you wanted to that way, tap out a tempo, drag it, type in the numbers, whatever you want, switch to MIDI, and it will do it on a global basis for all of the plugins, so you don't have to go one by one and kind of dial it in that way. Very cool. You have an input gain control and an output gain control. So at its max, it's at 0. You can get to that by clicking on the control key if you're on a Mac, and that will show you what the amount is. And so this way you can adjust your input-output volumes relative to what the previous chain is and what's going into, so that you have some control there. So usually you're more likely with a lot of these plugins to be pulling back gain in terms of working with it, but you also have the individual controls there as well. The recycle control is a new one. So this is kind of an interesting thing because many of the plugins have a mix, a wet-dry mix, and you can do this globally for the whole rack, which is kind of cool. So the audio coming in will split, and then you'll have a dry chain, and then you'll have all of the effects running in, and then they can get blended together through this knob. But it also has a recycle function. And what this does is it takes the whole chain of effects and feeds it back into itself. And this is kind of a cool way of regenerating. So this allows you to create some whole new types of things that you never could before. You have also with this rack, you have different sizes because you can shrink. So you can shrink the size of the rack, have a full rack, have it auto, decide how big it should be. And then if you go beyond it, you can scroll up and down if you get more gear in there. If you select the Show Gear button, which comes up by default, then it shows all the things. So if you wanted to add, let's say, a micro pitch shift in, you could drag it in here. You could reorder it by moving it in. When you drag it in, you can replace something. So if I wanted to drag something on top of this, you'll see it sort of highlight, and then that would give me the ability to replace the radiator with whatever it is that I'm dragging here. And so this gives you the ability, again, to just kind of generate and set up all these things in whatever order that you want. So you can move them around, slide around, all the other stuff. Decapitator, a big favorite. And it also what you have here, because you still have presets for all of the individual ones as well. So if you click on the little icon up here at the top, you can load in the presets that are specific to the Decapitator plugin, or to the Radiator plugin, or to the Microshift. So you have all of those that you can throw in as well. You have the ability to turn them off. You can solo one up inside the chain. So now you're hearing everything just through what the Radiator and what that's doing, in exclusion of the other ones. So if you run these within a host, there are some things that you can do, like in Pro Tools. If you control click on a plugin, it will mute everything after it. But there are some limitations. Here inside the rack format, you can solo focus on this sound in exclusion of the others. And then you can move things around, reorder things. So it gives you a lot of flexibility and control in terms of the layout. And all of the other functions are pretty much the same. They've added some things to a couple of the plugins. Mostly they're kind of minor tweaks. But overall, you get the same, like, amazing plugins. It's really kind of cool. The SoundToys stuff. So many people love them. I've seen them on so many sessions, and I've been using them as well. Some of these things, like the micro pitch shift or primal tap, is from like the prime time delay. Like there's some things. The Pan Man is the old pan scan. And while they're not direct models, they're sort of taking those basic ideas, capturing that sonic characteristic, and then and then adding their own kind of unique twist on it. So the SoundToys plugins, really, really cool. The effect rack is a great addition as part of the SoundToys 5 collection, and one that's worth checking out. So take a look. You can always download a demo and see if you like it. Anyway, nice addition. Thought I'd throw this in as the plugin of the week. Although it's not really a plugin, it's a rack of plugins. Some really cool new features that are added in. SoundToys effects rack as part of the SoundToys 5 update.